Let's talk about 2025. It was a year defined by a massive collision of forces. We're going to dive into the shifting sands of global power, the absolutely explosive acceleration of AI, a planet pushed right to its environmental brink, and the huge economic changes that came with it. Believe me, this wasn't just another flip of the calendar. It was more like a global reset.
And this quote, it just nails it. The transformation wasn't happening in just one little corner of the world, but across the entire system. From the geopolitical chessboard and the code running our lives, all the way to the actual climate of our planet. I mean, the stakes were just sky high.
So first up, let's talk about global power. In 2025, that whole post-Cold War setup, yeah, that felt like ancient history. Nations were busy forging brand new alliances. Old rivalries were heating up, and it was rewriting the rulebook for how countries dealt with each other, all in real time. And the key word here really is speed. This wasn't some slow diplomatic drift. Think about it. Economic blocs were forming around things like technology standards. Traditional military allies were suddenly finding themselves on opposite sides of a trade argument. This stuff wasn't happening over decades. It was happening in months, forcing every single country to scramble and figure out where they stood on this new crazy chessboard. And this is where things get really interesting, because 2025 was full of contradictions. The headlines, yeah, they were dominated by battlefields and these really dug-in conflicts. But at the exact same time, a completely different story was playing out at diplomatic tables. It created this super complex global situation where two countries might be enemies in one part of the world, but kinda sort of partners in another. And we can't forget, behind all the politics and the headlines about ceasefires, there was a massive human cost. The whole point of these high-level talks was to answer the call from millions of people caught right in the middle, a call for just basic safety, for dignity, for a future. This public pressure wasn't just background noise. It was a real, powerful force that politicians just couldn't ignore. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the force that was changing, well, pretty much everything. Technology. Specifically, 2025 was the year artificial intelligence stopped being this sci-fi concept and bam, it was in our daily lives. Big time.
And the thing about AI's impact is just how widespread it was. It wasn't just one thing. It was like this new layer built on top of everything. You had AI models starting to predict disease outbreaks, and in classrooms, you had learning assistants tailoring lessons to every single student. It was a total system-wide shift.
So, of course, this explosion of AI kicked off this massive global race, and it was happening on 3 different levels all at once. You had governments scrambling to put rules on a technology that was moving way faster than laws could be written. You had entire industries racing to adopt it, because they knew if they didn't, they'd be left behind. And then there was all of us, as a society, just trying to get our heads around what it all meant. And this is so important. The whole conversation just flipped on its head. For years, the challenge was all technical, right? It was, hey, can we even build AI this powerful? By 2025, that question was answered. The new, much harder question became an ethical one. Okay, now that we've built it, can we actually control it? Can we make sure it's used for good? And this amazing burst of innovation wasn't just about AI. It felt like humanity was dreaming big again. We were looking to the stars with new missions to the moon, and at the same time, we were looking inward with these incredible breakthroughs in medicine that were challenging everything we thought we knew about life itself. All right, this brings us to our third and maybe most urgent topic, our planet. Because in 2025, the climate crisis wasn't some far-off prediction anymore. It was here. You could see it, you could feel it, playing out all across the globe. I mean, the evidence was just everywhere, right? You literally couldn't ignore it. You saw it in coastlines being redrawn by floods, farmlands getting scorched by crazy heat waves, and whole towns being threatened by wildfires. This wasn't just bad weather anymore. It was the new volatile reality, and it was putting a huge strain on economies and governments everywhere. And all of this led to this huge shift in how the world was thinking. The conversation stopped being just about preventing climate change and became about something much more immediate: survival. Adaptation, preparing for the changes that are already happening, it wasn't a choice anymore. It was a must-do. But here's the other side of the coin. This crisis also sparked a massive response. If you look at this chart, you can see what was driving the change. Huge, and I mean huge, investments in clean energy. And look at that public pressure. It was off the charts. Now, international policy was still playing catch-up, but the money and the people were creating this powerful momentum for change. So you take all these massive shifts, political, technological, environmental, and what do you get? You get a total transformation of our economy and the very fabric of how we all live together. The ways we worked, traded, and connected with each other were changing in a deep, fundamental way. So what did this new economy actually look like? Well, this gives you a pretty good idea. For the first time, emerging markets weren't just taking part in the global economy, they were driving a huge chunk of its growth. And at the same time, you had AI and digital currencies completely rewriting the rules of finance and investment.
And for so many of us, this is where the changes really hit home at work. The whole idea of remote work just blew up, changing where companies could find talent. Automation started doing jobs we used to think only humans could do. It created a lot of anxiety, for sure, but also a ton of opportunity, pushing people to learn new skills for jobs that hadn't even existed 10 years before. That old 9-to-5 career for life model, it was starting to look like a museum piece.
Socially, the world was shrinking, Digital platforms meant culture could jump across oceans in a heartbeat. But the real story here was how they gave a megaphone to global movements, especially to young people who were demanding real, urgent action on everything from climate change to social justice. Their voices got incredibly loud. Okay, so when you pull all these different threads together, what's the big picture? What was 2025 really about? It wasn't just about the crises we were facing or the cool new tech we built. When you boil it all down, it was about the choices we all had to make in response to it. And this was the first fundamental choice. Were we going to work together on the big stuff, the challenges like climate change and AI that affected every single one of us? Or were we going to fall apart, retreat into our own corners, and let short-term rivalries stop us from solving problems that no one country could fix on its own? And the second big choice was all about our technology. Were we just going to race ahead, full steam, building the next big thing no matter what the consequences were? Or were we going to pause, take a breath, and build in some responsibility, some guardrails, to make sure all this progress was actually serving us, and not the other way around? And that, right there, is the heart of it. In 2025, the world didn't slow down, it woke up. The pace was insane, yeah, but it forced everyone to pay attention, to confront these huge questions. And the decisions made in that one single year, well, they're going to be echoing for a very, very long time. So that leaves us with one last big thought. We were at a turning point. We know history is watching. The only question is, what's it going to see?